controls Syria controls all the region that surrounds it, adding that these strategic plans to target Syria are also caused by its national and pan-Arab stance and because it is upholding the pan-Arab project of economic complementarity and Arab unity. He says Syria also has been backing the resistance movements in the region in Palestine, Lebanon, and Iraq. He cites what he calls the Rand Corporation project, which he says was presented to the White House and which calls for weakening and controlling the Arab region. He says that the United States planned, in cooperation with the Zionists, to attack the Twin Towers in New York in order to create a justification for fighting the so-called terrorism and thus fight the resistance movements in the region. He said the plan called for controlling Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, and some East European countries, in addition to Afghanistan, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait, and toppling Arab regimes, including Syria, Jordan, Egypt, Tunisia, Algeria, and others. He also cites Bernard Lewis' project, which calls for fragmenting each state after the Sykes-Picot fragmentation in 1916 to yet smaller states, including a special study on Syria in particular. Al-Qasser then asks Hussein if he does not think that what is happening in the region cannot be separated from that is going on in Syria. Hussein says, no doubt Syria has been playing a pivotal role in backing the Arab National Liberation Movement, pointing out that the Zionist project is intended to control the Arab homeland and establish Greater Israel. He speaks of books that were written on this issue, including The Dagger of Israel, which was published immediately after the Suez War, and which includes the Israeli strategic plan to fragment major Arab countries and establish Greater Israel, and a plan by a person named David Karma, which was published in a book in the Zionist entity entitled The Struggle. Why until when he says Karma claims that the Arabs are aliens to the region who arrived from the Arabian Peninsula and persecuted the peoples of the region, and that Israel must establish a state for the Maronites in Lebanon, a state for the Druze in Syria, a state for the Kurds in Iraq, a state for the Africans in Sudan, and a state for the Copts in Egypt, and Israel must leave these stateless. Hussein says that the 1967 war was an implementation of this idea and was aimed at establishing an economic Israeli superpower as part of the new Middle East project, which Shimon Peres drew up after the signing of the Oslo Agreement of Submission. He says that the Jewish lobby in the United States, led by Paul Wolfowitz and Richard Perls, drew a plan for the U.S. domination of the world. He adds, I agree with my brother Ahmed when he speaks about the Twin Towers. High-level quarters in the United States blew up the towers to justify the counter-terrorism war and the Crusader War against Islam so that the United States might dominate the world. Thus, they were able to topple the regime in Iraq, occupy the country, control its oil, and destroy its army and achievements. The Jews of the U.S. administration said that now was Syria's turn. Iraq smuggled the mass destruction weapons to Syria, and now we must go to Damascus and change the regime. However, His Excellency President Bashar al-Assad's students prevented the realization of this Zionist aim. He says we, the Palestinian resistance factions, denounce and condemn this U.S. interference in Syria's internal affairs. Al-Qasser comments by saying that this proves that Israel has been instrumental in what is taking place in the Arab region in general, particularly in Syria. Daira Bustanji, a political analyst, calls in to contribute to the discussion by telephone from Amman. Al-Qasser asks him about the role of the Israeli factor in the plot against Syria. He salutes Syria because of its resistance against the plot that is being concocted against it, given that it is the last fortress in our resisting and progressive Arab project. Commenting, Rama says that the Zionist entity realizes that if it is able to remove the head of the regime in Syria, it will be able to wipe out the resistance, but it has not been able to do that. He says that Syria helped the Lebanese and Palestinian resistance, adding that when the United States failed in its efforts to force Syria to change its stand, Rafiq al-Hariri was killed in order to accuse Syria of the murder. He says that eventually the Zionist entity realized that Syria must be struck from within, and therefore it cooperated with the United States to realize this objective by striking at the Syrian society from within, using the sectarian card. Rama says that the West wanted to impose the Turkish model on the Arab states, adding that the Muslim Brotherhood established parties to rule Tunisia and Egypt, noting that in Jordan, a Justice and Freedom, or Equality, party was established within this context, and here in Syria some gangs have started to establish a party called the Justice and Construction Party. He says such a party was chosen because it accepts the Zionist project in the region and the U.S. plan. He says Turkey, which is a NATO member, is establishing extremely close military, economic, and other forms of relations with Israel. He says that the Israeli, Turkish, US, British, French cooperation has not stopped targeting Syria from within, noting that the protests in Syria started from mosques, and that sheikhs issued fatwas, or Islamic religious rulings, to fragment Syria from within. Khalid al-Zubaydi, a political and economic analyst, speaking by telephone from Amman, says that this anti-Syrian conspiracy by the Zionist entity is not news, noting that the media that are sponsoring the change have lost their credibility, adding that newsrooms in certain space channel television stations have been transformed into false war operations rooms. He hopes that the crisis will end and that Syria will be stronger than it was before. On the role of the media in Syrian development, Rama says the Israeli Psychological Warfare Center inside the Israeli army summoned about 127 Israeli researchers specialized in psychology, sociology, and anthropology, noting that these and other experts studied the dialects in each area in order to be able to speak to each area directly in its own dialect. He says that rumors must be written in a way that is connected with popular adages and the folktales that are related to each area. He says that despite all these psychological efforts, Zipi Livni announced that the anti-Syria psychological warfare had failed, adding that the sectarian war and attempts to separate the masses from their leadership had also failed. Speaking about the media war against Syria, Rama says that 42 space channel televisions have been bought to convince peoples in the West of the need to demand military intervention against Syria, noting that they are disseminating very serious information against the Syrian authorities, the army, and security forces in order to convince Western peoples of the need to compel their governments to make decisions to attack Syria. He says the media have been issuing orders to groups and instructing them how to move. Citing an example, he adds, for instance, when they say that large groups are moving towards the Al-Umayyan or Al-Abbasiyan square, it means that the people should go to these squares. He says that at certain times, the Syrian media response was not commensurate with the size of the fierce campaign, which made many people accept what these media presented, but the daily experience proves that these hired media outlets, which are connected with the CIA and the Israeli Mossad, are implementing an agenda that is in harmony with the agenda of the US Congress, the Pentagon, the CIA, the Israeli Mossad, and certain other sides, in addition to the British and French security services. He says certain media were told to address the Syrian diplomats abroad, noting that this issue has not been mentioned so far, and adding that attempts were made to manipulate certain Syrian figures abroad. He says that these media continue to launch their onslaught against Syria, expressing his conviction that the media that were employed against Syria will fail abjectly. Asked in conclusion to comment on demands to veto efforts to give the Palestinian state the UN membership, Hussein says that this demonstrates double standards by the United States and the EU and undermines the credibility of the US policy in the region. He says that in practical terms there is no US policy in the region, but there is an Israeli policy implemented by the United States. He says that the two-state solution is an Israeli interest and a solution for the problem of Israel and not the Palestinian problem. Source.
Okay, so I think this particular document explains pretty clearly how the U.S. and Israel work and their MO, modus operandi. It's just like what they did in South Korea. President Park didn't want the THAAD system because her people didn't want the THAAD system. So what they did was they started the rumors of her about being a witch and practicing magic because the South Koreans are so superstitious about that. And they led the people to get her arrested. And see, these are some kind of the tactics the U.S. uses. If a president doesn't do what they tell him, or they deny a military system, they get overthrown and they put somebody else in. And this whole ugly thing, it's so big and it's so ugly. You know, it is going to take divine intervention to stop it. I mean, if any of you out there have ever read the Greater Israel Project, you should. You know, open your eyes. This is about genociding the entire Middle East and giving it to Israel, just like they're doing with the Palestinians. They all need to be stopped because they're all crazy damn devils.